Welcome to this naturalproductsglobal.com presentation on global trends in organic, data, deals and disruptors, presented by Jim Manson, Editor-in-Chief at MPG. So here's the sequence of things. First, I'm going to say a few words about naturalproductsglobal.com, and then I'm going to navigate around 5 or 6 broad themes. I'll start with a little bit of scene setting, giving the big picture view, and then I'll get straight into the headline figures for the last 12 or 18 months. And then I'm going to drill down a bit into some of the country and regional stories to give a bit of an on-the-ground flavour of what's going on in some key markets. We'll check in on investment in organic, and we'll look at the regulatory environment. And I want to look at how we communicate organic, what we can say, what we can't say, and what happens when we try to change the conversation. And I'm going to look at how we move organic on, how we evolve organic, and that's an opportunity to look at some of the new disruptors in the sector. And I'll finish with a little look at future prospects and a quick summary. So Natural Products Global is an international web portal for the natural and organic community worldwide. It's built around a daily news service. We publish a weekly news email which reaches a trade audience of around 80,000 worldwide. And I think probably the most exciting thing for us is that we now have a situation where we've got a growing archive of news, interviews, videos and white paper resources all available in one place. But this is what we're mostly about, the stories, articles that we post onto the NPG site every day. So to judge by some usually fairly reliable business metrics, I think we can safely say that organic markets worldwide are currently in pretty robust good health. We're seeing organic sales growing worldwide, market penetration is rising, M&A activity and investment levels remain high, retail engagement is deepening and consumer awareness is increasing around the world. So what's driving this growth? We're seeing the big direction of travel in food and drink globally is towards this idea of healthy and sustainable. We're seeing increasing retailer engagement with organic across all the channels, from the major multiples to independents. Food scandals, food contamination incidents are a big driver, particularly in certain parts of the world, Southeast Asia, for example. Growing interest in clean label, shorter ingredient lists, those sorts of things. A growing middle class in emerging economies, bringing new people into the organic market. And millennials, now identified by the organic community as the most engaged demographic. But interestingly, it's Generation Z, the generation coming afterwards, who are expected to reset expectations on health and wellness. So let's take a look at some of the headline figures. The 2018 edition of the joint Vogl iPhone publication World of Organic Agriculture, which is launched at BFAC at the early part of this year, told us that the global organic industry is worth around $90 billion US. The EU market is worth 33.5 billion euros. And the US market is the world's biggest national market at 38.9 billion euros, followed by Germany, 9.5 billion, France, 6.7 billion, China, 5.9 billion euros, and then Canada, Italy, UK, Switzerland, and Sweden coming in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th place, respectively. More detail to this big picture view builds during the year as individual markets report their most recent national data. And in Europe, I think the Nordic countries have been clearly the standout performers here. Sweden grew its organic market by 9.3% in 2017, nudging itself closer to the magic 10% figure, or 10% share of total food and drink for organic. Denmark, already a member of that pretty exclusive 10% club, saw penetration hit 13.3%, a pretty remarkable tipping point, as Organic Denmark had pointed out. Norway reported organic sales growth of around about 9%. There's some challenges here and some disappointment that the Norwegian government has abandoned its organic targets. Looking more widely across Europe, we can see double-digit growth in a number of key markets. In fact, double-digit growth has become pretty much the norm in the last few years. France has clearly become a major force in organic, up there in the top sort of 3 or 4 globally, growing its market by 20% in 2016 and achieving pretty solid growth in 2017, 2018. Spain grew its organic market by 12.5% in 2017, propelling it into the global top 10. And it's also set some pretty ambitious targets itself for organic market share at 20% and organic farmland at 30% by 2020. Italy has seen organic penetration rise by 70% between 2013 and 2016 to reach 3.4%, which is a pretty respectable share for organic. And then again, a pretty remarkable figure, I think. There's 25% of all food launches in Germany in 2017 carried an organic claim. Turning to North America and Australasia, in the US, the organic market grew at 6 times the pace of conventional. Pretty impressive. In Canada, a period of tremendous growth, according to the OTA, saw organic penetration grow to 2.6% from 1.7% in 2012. In Australia, where personal health is now the key motivation to buy organic, and that's quite an inversion on what had been the case, where it's very much environmentally underpinned, the market is set to be worth 2 billion Australian dollars, and that's 1.5 billion US dollars by the end of 2018. The New Zealand market, in the meantime, grew 30% to be worth 600 million New Zealand dollars. And looking at the wider world, India's organic-only experiment in the small state of Sikkim has been paying multiple benefits. And while Israel and Egypt lead in certified organic production in the Middle East, the UAE is quickly developing its export and domestic markets, with organic shelf space up 60% over a 5-year period, according to Mintel. China also increasing its direct organic exports, but also exercising its financial muscle in the organic arena. Reports, for example, that it's to buy the US yogurt brand Stonyfield Organic. India is a country which has shown that it is really serious about organic over the last 15 years or so. India's northeastern organic hub is really the area that's driving growth, and this organic policy forms part of a national wider agricultural policy to create a sustainable bio-village model. The new targets have been set by the Indian government to grow the organic market by between 20 and 25% between 2017 and 2020 to be worth 6 billion US dollars. And the organic state experiment in Sikkim has paid a triple dividend, which I think will be really interesting to other observers, where we've seen improved health, both for farm workers and local people, higher farm income, and a significant boost in ecotourism. And the really interesting thing, I think, about India is that all of this has been followed through with some proper joined-up thinking. The Indian government launched what it's called a game-changing new organic regulation and national logo to tie all this up in early 2017. Separate Indian government initiatives have linked organic growers directly to the big online giants like Amazon and India's own online operator, Big Basket. Really sort of enterprising policy making going on there, and increasing inward investment. World Bank investment in the Indian fresh produce exporter Suminta, a Singaporean investment in online organic deli startup I Order Fresh. And India's Azafran Organics announced that it was setting a target of getting its products into 10,000 retail outlets across India, which just gives a scale of the ambition and size of the thinking going on in India currently. Now, the US organic sector definitely has many good stories about organic to tell. The Organic Trade Association, for example, announced record retail sales of organic in 2017. Consumer engagement with organic is widening at 83% of Americans regularly buy organic. And despite a slight slowing of growth in 2017, organic still outpacing conventional really rather impressively. But there are also some serious challenges developing on the policy making and regulatory fronts. The OTA has accused the Trump administration of launching an outright assault on organic and has vowed to fight back. And you can see that story on the top left there. There's been a spate of negative media headlines, particularly around organic fraud, and that second story on the right from the top is a Washington Post coverage of large consignments from China of purportedly organic ingredients, raw materials that turn out not to be. The other interesting thing is I think we're seeing some dissent coming from within the organic sector in the States too. Activist organic farmers are protesting about what they see as the failures of the US NOP, National Organic Programme. An organisation called the Real Organic Project has just been formed. Nature's Path, one of the big heritage brands, best known heritage brands in the US, has resigned from the OTA, its own trade association, for what it calls pushing a non-organic agenda. So moving on to the UK, another country where you could say that it's experienced some local difficulties. What will Brexit mean? A short answer to that is nobody really knows, even at this very late stage. But I think it's clear that there is real anxiety in the UK organic community about the impact of a possible no-deal Brexit. And in the industry sees as a worst-case scenario, the UK could be shut out of EU markets for organic for close to a year as it applies for third country status. And Britain's third country status, which is what it would have outside the EU, could also threaten trade with the US because of the current arrangements in trade that all are underpinned by the EU organic regulation and equivalency, mutual acceptance arrangements. But the UK is working hard to argue the case for a green Brexit. And I think with the UK, the organic sector thinks that it is time now that the mainstream food retail operators seize the organic opportunity. The UK organic market has achieved 7 years of consecutive growth. It suffered during the 2008-2012 recession, and in fact sales declined, but it's pulled back strongly out of that. And the UK is still a major organic consumer market, ranked 7th in the world, valued at around £2 billion. Specialist organic retailers have performed really quite well. Planet Organic, for example, looking to double its store count. But interest from the major retailers, the big supermarkets, has been patchy, and as a result of that, total organic share, runs behind that of most of the UK's European neighbours. So I think the industry, the organic sector, believes that the first of the major retailers that seizes the organic opportunity is very likely to be a winner in that sector. So let's have a look at the investment picture. I think we've seen 18 months or so of really intense merger and acquisition activity and industry consolidation, typically with pioneer organic brands, the target of multinational food businesses, a slew of big ticket deals, and you can see a few examples of them here involving companies like L'Oreal, Unilever, Coca-Cola, Campbell's. The biggest deal of all, Amazon's acquisition of Whole Foods Market for 13.7 billion US dollars, and 2017 described as a year of tectonic shifts in natural and organic. We've also seen the multinationals launching their own organic lines and brands, and starting organic business seeding operations and incubation schemes. An interesting one there from Kraft Heinz, supporting what they natural organic brands that they see as shaping the future of food. Nestle claiming to be, an interesting choice of words, democratizing the organic product chain with the launch of its organic oat lines in South America and Brazil. Generally, corporate investment is seen as a measure of the success of organic's growing appeal and the migration of organic ideas into the mainstream. But there are some concerns about what return on investment expectations might be with some of these companies. Will they have the patience? Could we see the loss of brands over the longer term, loss of heritage organic brands over that longer term? It's interesting to see that the specialist brands are also eyeing up potential takeover targets and investment opportunities. For example, the Malmo-based Midsola's €48.5 million acquisition of German organic pioneer Davert, pretty much a mega deal in its own right, I would have thought. In February, Arla Foods, the Danish dairy cooperative, acquired the rights to use the Yo Valley name, Yo Valley being the UK's biggest organic yoghurt producer, and I think actually the biggest single UK organic business. And in October, Arla launched its organic Baby and Me brand, already established in Denmark, into the UK, and what's been seen as a big sort of digital first push from them. So turning to retailer investment, in Germany, Aldi announced that it was launching 60 new organic lines in 2018 to meet what it has called a booming consumer demand. Lidl Denmark reported what it called explosive growth in organic sales and its ambition to increase sales by a further 50%, sales of organic by a further 50% in a 2-3 year period. So the discounters setting the pace for organic sales growth in the UK also. Aldi's seen its organic sales rise by 50%. And so how are the discounters succeeding so dramatically in organic? By going massive, says Tord Nederland of Danish discounter Netto, who gave a talk in the UK recently where he said, if you're serious about organic, you've got to make organic visible. You've got to, as he put it, hit customers with 10 metres of organic when they come into the store. We're seeing some very interesting developments amongst the retail specialists as well. Here in that top left, you can see a French organic supermarket chain, Bio Cipon, which has 110 stores across Europe, opened its first store in Japan. UK's Planet Organic, I've just mentioned, announced plans to double its store count in 5 years. South Africa's fast-growing wellness warehouse business, the story on the bottom left there, is putting organic front and centre of its wellness proposition. And in Hawaii, the local chain Down to Earth and Whole Food Market, both opening new flagship stores in the last 6 or 9 months. So the arrival of a new wave of organic retail disruptors on the retail scene around the world is shaking things up quite a bit. Stockholm, Sweden-based retailer Paradiset is waging what it calls a war on fake food, taking the fights direct to the supermarkets. and that on the top left, that is Johannes Kohlberg speaking at the Nordic Organic Food Fair last year on that theme. In Spain, Bilbao's Labores joined the growing ranks of Europe's organic retail cooperatives, where they're very strong in countries like France and the UK. Brandless and Thrive Market are both online operators challenging the status quo in the US. Brandless particularly interesting. It's a relatively small product line, about 200 or 300 products, but with a high percentage of organic, but where all the products are priced $3. An interesting one to watch. And Thrive Market positioning itself very much with Middle America affordability in its sights. So how should we, as a sector, be communicating organic? And what happens when we try to change the conversation? Well, here on the top left, the story is about a Swedish court instructing the Swedish retailer Coop not to repeat claims made in a promotional video called The Organic Effect. And that video took the form of watching a family over about a week, and at the beginning of this trial, the whole family, parents and the children, right down to the young children, had their blood counts done, and what that showed was presence of pesticide, fungicides and growth regulators. At the end of the experiment, which involved eating organic for a week, those had virtually disappeared. The Danish arm of Coop, this is the second story here, cancelled part of a hard-hitting organic campaign. The headline on the cover of Coop's in-house magazine here translates as "Pesticides are an everyday food." When it cancelled the ads under some pressure from conventional food operators, Coop itself was pretty unapologetic and said it had only cancelled the ads because it had achieved all the publicity that it needed. This ad from US yogurt brand, organic brand, and organic trailblazer Stonyfield was attacked for crossing a line, and the line it's crossed, according to its critics, was bringing children into a political debate, a GM debate in this case. A 25-second video they produced featured elementary school age children talking about why they don't like or trust GM foods. And again, despite this being seen as quite controversial, Stonyfield stood by its decision to involve children in this discussion, saying it's a completely legitimate thing to do. But of course, brands ultimately do need to balance their business values and ethical values with reputational risk, particularly in this sort of social media age. So moving on to regulation and policy. Regulatory and political pressures have very much been a feature of the organic scene on both sides of the Atlantic over the last 2 or 3 years. Early proposals for the revision of the EU organic regulation threatened what iPhone EU called a lose-lose situation, a lot of disappointment there. And instead of being an enabler for organic to be a flagship model for sustainable farming growth, the final text has been seen as fragile and still containing important weaknesses. And I think the frustrations at the direction that the revision process has been travelling in have led to a sort of rethink about regulation. Krav in Sweden announced that all options are on the table when it launched a consultation on its future last year, including withdrawal from the EU regulation. It decided against that in the final analysis, but the very fact that it considered it, I think, is a measure of some of that frustration. In Denmark, organic stakeholders have discussed a possible Organic Plus label as concerns have grown that current EU standards may be stifling growth and innovation. And there's been anger expressed by the Italian association Assobio at a system which it sees allowing the non-polluter pays principle to flourish. In the US, the Organic Trade Association says that it will sue the US Department of Agriculture over fears that the Trump government wants to kill the popular Organic Welfare Standards Bill, which would raise animal welfare standards. The OTA accuses the USDA of ignoring overwhelming support on this issue. And separately, there's been a coalition of organic stakeholders warning that the $50 billion US organic industry is being shut out of discussions over revision of another major piece of legislation, the US Farm Bill. Is regulation itself a threat to the organic idea? That's a question that was posited by a prominent organic insider, Professor Lampkin, at last year's IFOAM EU conference in Tallinn. And while he recognises that regulation serves an extremely valuable purpose, he also says that it can fossilise current practice and narrow ambitions that are convenient for big food and mainstream food operators, but actually less so for the organic industry and movement. And he asks, is organic any longer an open source, citizen-owned concept, which is what it always has been and should be? And he says that if we don't maintain that, we will see new movements forming, and in fact they already are forming, as ways of rejecting what people are seeing as an institutionalized organic model. So how do we move organic on, and how do we evolve organic? What kind of organic do we want in the future? What is precipitating these new movements that Nick Lampkin was talking about just then? And what form will these new movements take? Will we go back to the future, or will we look to science and tech-based tools to advance organic? And what will be the trends that will shape the future of organic in the coming years? So I suppose if you want to know what food trends will shape the future of organic, then the best person to ask is a futurologist. And the Danish futurologist Bertha Lindahl gave a really interesting talk at BeerFac earlier this year on this subject. And among her insights were to watch out for the next anti-trends. And they're where, she says, where mega trends start life. For example, sustainability was an anti-trend and it then becomes a mega trend. Anti-trend, she says, acts as a critique of mega trends. So localism, for example, acts as a critique of globalization. She says that while it's very useful to have a description of the next phase of organic 3.0 as it's being characterised, we should also be actively anticipating organic 4.0 if we want to stay ahead of the curve. So among those trends identified by Bertha Lindahl were the new green diet, that's the plant-based revolution that we're seeing taking root, socialising food, social interaction with food, and new eating opportunities, zero waste, disruptive logistics. As she says, owning the route to the customer will be a defining feature of the successful food brand or retailer. And by staying ahead of the tech curve, smaller operators can continue to thrive in the digital world. So, getting a little bit more radical, the Dutch organic veteran Ronald van Marlen gave a talk titled The Silent Takeover at BeerFac this year. And van Marlen says that corporate ownership of organic brands has important negative consequences, and he says he wants us to actively reclaim and re-galvanise the organic movement. And he argues that market-dominated organics are driving unrealistic and undesirable targets for growth, and he highlights the yawning gap between supply and demand in some parts of the world. Van Marlen says that corporate ownership of organic is eroding organic principles and shrinking organic ambitions. And as he says, we're moving from a holistic, process-based approach to an end product orientation that validates organic with a microscope. This type of thinking is also reflected in commentaries by groups like the Food Ethics Council. You can see the second story there, which identifies what it calls the false and limiting idea of the consumer, and it promotes food citizenry and more participatory approaches. And staying with those participatory approaches, one of the big buzz phrases that we're hearing at the moment is PGS organic, participatory guarantee systems, schemes. These schemes revolve around the participation of local stakeholders and are built on trust, social networks and knowledge exchange. In many ways they're similar to the trust-based systems that kick-started the modern organic movement in the 70s and 80s. It's also renewed interest in regenerative agriculture. For example, the new regenerative organic certified scheme, which you can see on the top images here with a strap line, farm like the world depends on it. And then underneath, Annie's one of the heritage organic brands in the States, aligning itself to this new movement. At the same time, organic producers are embracing technology. Organic farmers, who typically are younger on average than conventional farmers, have been early adopters of Internet of Things tech, which helps maximise farm efficiency and yields, making organic more viable, more productive. Less desirable perhaps, and maybe this touches on what Ronald van Molen was talking about, validating organic with the microscope. Test kit organic techniques are likely to become more prevalent as the need grows to tackle organic fraud problem. The expanding science-based supporting organic will play, I think, an increasingly important role in future, creating the good news stories that will widen organic buy-in. The recent French study, which involved 70,000 people, which found that people who eat organic are 25% less likely to develop certain cancers, was a striking new contribution to that. There's an example here below as well. The Time magazine recently running a front cover story flagging up the science-backed health benefits of eating organic. So to summarise the organic opportunity, organic dovetails perfectly with the growing aspiration for healthy and sustainable solutions. And key drivers of recent growth remain strong and stable. Growing retailer participation with organic, especially when in partnership with advocacy groups and national agencies, is creating an opportunity for organic to cross over into the mainstream and attain real critical mass. Corporate investment in organic is allowing successful organic businesses to move up to another level commercially and reflects organic's growing mainstream appeal. But the long-term picture of corporate acquisition experience is mixed. Many heritage organic brands have been lost in this process. The organic movement will need a strong united voice to be able to influence crucial policy and regulatory decisions in its favour. Evolving organic successfully will need an artful blend, drawing on tradition and experience, but also embracing the latest science and technology. But set against the backdrop of a frankly global epidemic of preventable lifestyle disease and an urgent need for practical climate change, and organic ticks multiple boxes in both cases. Organic's compelling healthy body, healthy planet proposition means that it's extremely well placed to continue on its current growth trajectory. Thank you very much for listening.